So, I'm going to be talking about my permaculture journey. And because we've just had the storytelling from the timeline, I thought it might be good to carry on with my own story. So that's what I'm going to do. And also, community resilience. A whole aim of permaculture is to create resilient communities, food with our own food and real community building. So, I'm just going to talk about the last 36 years. I'm really old. What I've been up to. So, starting with Rainbow Valley Farm, which Joe and I set up in 1988. Then we were involved in setting up a farmers market in our village because we needed somewhere to sell our produce. And then 2008, after Joe passed away, I set up Matakana Green Swap, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then the farm got too much for me, and I sold it, and I moved to the village, and I set up my new home. And my latest project, which I'm very proud of, Mahurangi Waste Busters, where our whole aim is to reduce waste to landfill. So I'm just going to fly through them, show you lots of pictures. This was Rainbow Valley Farm. Okay, so Joe and we bought 50 acres of rundown farmland in 1988, and our aim was to create an abundant permaculture paradise from degraded land. Can you see, am I in the way, or shall I? Oh, I need to, is that all right? So this is us back then. This is our house truck. Oh, behind us, you can't see it. All young and enthusiastic. We came with our dog, and well, this was us nearly 20 years later. And we bought this land because it was cheap. We could afford it. It was run down, it was weed infested, pest infested, and badly eroded. And so we moved there in our house truck, like a couple of gypsies, and we lived in that for about 18 months until we built a barn. And this is how we got clean. We heated up the old bathtub and lit the copper, and that was our hot water. And then this is how I did the washing, all by hand and first gardens. So our first priorities were water. And we were extremely lucky. We had springs high up on the land. So we're able to capture those and gravity feed it down to where we needed it. And then we wanted to get some food happening. So that was the next thing. And then we started on our permaculture analysis, observation, identify resources, do our sector analysis, and develop our design plan. So design plan got developed, all our different zones, what we were going to have, and then off we went into implementing it. The first thing we needed to do was to plant a shelter belt along our southwestern boundary because the winds just blasted in from there. And, fruit trees, they don't like getting blasted by cold winds. And then we planted our orchard. Fortunately, we had some mature macrocarpa trees on the property. So we were able to mill those and use that wood for building our first buildings. And then, of course, the big one, build soil. This area, this farm we'd built had been, of course, settled by the original European settlers 100 and something years before. And they wanted to create pasture out of this rainforest land. So they cut down the good trees, they, for milling, for timber, they burnt off the rest, and it was bare, steep hillsides. And you know what happens? It rained heavily, all the soil washed off, down into the river and out into the harbour. So there was very, very little topsoil. So that was a big job that we had to do, build soil. And so this was what we all had, all of this, the weeds, gorse, kikuyu grass, ragwort, lots of possums, possum paradise. And so we started building soil any way we could. We had a worm farm, we had a pig tractor. So here, We had a couple of little piggies in this frame with a little house and a water trough, and every day we moved it on. And you can see after 24 hours, we had a bare patch, and that's where we planted our fruit trees. It was cleared and it was fertilized. So that was one of our strategies. And then, of course, compost heaps everywhere. And then we needed to get that shelter belt in. So we planted those during Cyclone Bowler. We were living in the house truck, and I honestly thought it was going to blow over. I was a bit scared. But anyway, this is our boundary here. We planted a whole load of trees up there. That was it 20 years later. So nature is remarkably fast. So this was 2 years after we got there. By then, we'd built a barn and we'd moved out of the house truck into the barn. You can see all our fruit trees we'd planted with little piles of mulch all around them. And we'd excavated for our house up here, and there's all the building materials all sort of in front of the house. So this picture here was, just a minute, that was 1990. This is 1998, 8 years later. You can see all those shelter belt trees had grown up. That was 12 years after they were planted. By then, the orchard had grown up. Those little brown patches are all fruit trees with mulch around them. That was our house was built with an earth roof. House garden here. So this was zone 1. Chickens, nursery, shade house. Zone 2 there. And orchard here, part of zone 2. All in all, we planted 800 fruit and nut trees. Yep, most of them did. Maybe there was 1 or 2 that didn't, but and so this picture here was our neighbours side of our neighbours there and us there, and you can see our newly planted shelter belt trees. 1988 when we first got there. 20 years later, nature is remarkably fast. And from here you can see quite well, this was our zone 1 garden, that area there, zone 2 around here, and then we had another big market garden a bit further away, and we had, so you can see all the banana palms, and then we had farm forestry, bit up the top there, but then by then we had this amazing shelter here, and you can see the neighbour's land is still eroded. This was planting out in front of the house, our keyhole beds. And then you can see the orchard down there. And then that was 20 years later. You can see we had a pond in the middle. And very soon, of course, we had a lot of vegetables. That was 1990, 2 years after we got there. Orchard's coming along nicely. And that's a good shot to see these hills. They were bare. They were just burnt off, and so we let nature claim them back. Yep, particularly over this area. Yeah. It actually took longer. That was existing. Some of that was coming back, but other areas were just pure gorse, and we left it. We left the gorse, and the birds nest in the gorse. They drop their droppings. The seeds go down. They come up, and in 10 years, it went from pure gorse to native bush. And then first of all, the manuka and the kānuka come up, and then the punga and all sorts of things come through. But in our areas that we kept open, pretty soon we had just about everything. What's that one called? That passion fruit, vanilla passion fruit. The rainbow pawpaw. Just about everything. That's a pear. um, all sorts of stuff we had. Excuse me. And this was our fruit and nut harvest. You know, we had things harvestable at every season of the year. We grew rice. We worked with a guy, Yoshi, up in Kaiwaka, who grew rice. So we got some seedlings off him. We had a few experiments. Some of them were failures, but once we got this rice paddy going, it was really, really successful. And that was our harvest. We used to grow in that little rice paddy. We could harvest about 50 kilos of rice a year. Yeah. And of course, Joe there's our rice drying, some of it. And Joe, coming from Austria, he loved mushrooms. And it's a national pastime, going in the forest and harvesting all the wild mushrooms. So, of course, we had to have mushrooms. So we grew shiitake and nameko, all sorts of mushrooms on logs. And, of course, we had to have bees. And honey was one of our big products that we sold. I used to do so much preserving. I had this whole cupboard full of full jars at the end of every summer. And it was an old McDonald's farm. We had everything, just about every bird. We had chickens, ducks, geese, guinea fowl, pigeons, and sheep. We had sheep. We had these Wiltshire horned sheep, the ones with the horns. And because they shear themselves, they drop their wool. And you don't have to, because if you've only got a couple of sheep, it's a pain having to shear them. So these ones, they shear themselves, they just drop their wool. And they're very hardy. So they don't, because as you know, Northland, up our area, was really heavy clay. And if it gets muddy, their hooves start to rot. So because they evolved in rocky ground, sheep did. So, but these ones were very hardy. They didn't take. The first ones were, but we got a male and a female, and after that we were fine. We had house cows, so I used to get out and milk the cow in the morning, make cheese, and then we decided we needed a house. So that was our house site, surrounded by gorse and a bit of manuka when we first went there. And this is it 20 years later. So I'll show you some pictures of the house. It was an earth wall. The exterior walls were concrete block, but all the interior walls were mud brick, which we made ourselves. We made thousands of them. And we had an earth roof. 6 years. Because we were trying to do this project without a mortgage, because we realized just if you don't have to pay a mortgage, you don't. Yeah, you could grow your food. You didn't have to go out to work so much. We did, but we both did. Joe went out, and during this whole process, I think he went out and built 3 or 4 houses for other people, and then I had a part-time job. But if you don't have to pay a mortgage, it makes life so much easier. So it took time. So while we were building this house, okay, we need an electrician. Okay. So we would go out and work or earn some money for the next stage of the house. That's why it took 6 years. And that's me planting the roof. I weeded it twice. And then I said to those plants, you're on your own. What? Good. What we found, this is it later, succulents. Succulents are amazing because they kind of hold water. They don't go brown in summer. It still stays nice and green looking. So there was about that much soil. Then there was a butanol layer, which was the waterproofing. And under that was a layer of felt to cushion it. And under that was wooden sarking. Yeah, so the butanol was the waterproofing. quite thick, quite thick. And this is part of our mud brick making time. We've got some friends in. Come to lunch and make a few mud bricks. Oh, I seem to quite enjoy it. We did it. This was really low tech. Joe dug a hole, and over there we'd shovel some clay in the hole, put some straw in, put some mud, some straw, some water in, put some good music on, do a bit of dancing, and then scoop it out by hand and push it through these little frames and then push them out onto the lawn. And then we'd leave them there for about 4 or 5 days, just so the outside hardened up and they had a bit of a crust on them. And then we put them inside under a roof to mature and dry for about 6 to 8 months. Because if you left them out in the sun, the outside would dry and the inside would be wet and they'd crack. So you had to dry them slowly inside. So that's another reason why it took so long. So that was for the music going. And so when it was finished, it was a lovely house. And the garden was right out in front. We also had compost toilets, and they were pretty nice. A sitter and a squatter. We were teaching permaculture in Japan, and we brought this one back with us. And coming through customs, they said, because this was actually a second-hand one, we scrubbed it clean. And Joe brought it in his hand luggage, and they said, "What's that?" He said, it's a pottery. It's pottery. Oh, yeah, ceramic. Yeah, fine. So, and then gradually over time, people got interested in what we were doing. You know, first we were these weird hippies growing dope. Oh, no, they're not. No, they're quite genuine. Oh, and then we became respectable. And then we had all sorts of architects saying, "Can we come and have a look at your earth roof house and your mud brick walls?" So anyone was welcome. And then the local school said, "Can we bring a class up?" So we started to have classes come. And here Joe's teaching these kids how to make boats out of banana leaves. And then we used to get from Japan twice a year, a group of permaculture students used to come from the Permaculture Centre in Japan. We used to take them out to Betsy's place in Pakuranga as well. And then, so that's enough about Rainbow Valley Farm. And if anyone wants more information, Country Calendar came and did a segment on us, and it went to air in 2005, and it's on YouTube now. So if anyone wants to go on YouTube and Google Rainbow Valley Farm, and it comes up. Is it? Oh my God, is it really? Imagine that. Oh. Anyway, so we're growing all this food. Where are we going to sell it? We had a roadside stall, but there was too much for that. So then while we were in Japan teaching permaculture, our Japanese friends took us on a little tour around some farmers markets up in the north of Japan, little village farmers markets. And we were so impressed because they were true farmers markets. The farmers were there selling their produce, and the farmer and his family would be there, and at the back of their stall there was a picture of them on their farm. So when we got back to New Zealand, Joe was invited to give a talk to the local tourism AGM. So he thought, oh, I'll tell them about farmers markets. So he did. And the local businesses who were there said, "Oh, no, that's going to take away from our businesses." But there was one guy there, Richard Didsbury, who was doing a development in Matakana, and he was inspired. So he approached us and said, "Will you help me set up a farmers market?" So we did. And we got together all the little growers like us, and we met for about 9 months and figured out, how it was going to look, what the rules were. We came up with a whole little constitution. It was going to be a true farmers market, no outside fashion from Bali, no cheap stuff from, it was food grown in the local area within 30 kilometres or processed in the local area, like with olive oil and um, pickles and all of that. Bread, yeah, all of that stuff. Wine and yeah. So so we got it going, and that's on that country calendar clip as well. In the early days, it was all it was just locals. So in their gumboots, not the trendy people who come today. Now it's become so popular, and you get thousands of people through there. The locals now they arrive at 8 in the morning as soon as the market's open, get their shopping and go, and then before the visitors start arriving. No, there were a few, but not that many. There were a few. And there's other markets around the area, but they have clothing and other stuff. But this, yeah, I think even now the land is getting sold for housing, and so there's less small growers around. And anyway, the small growers that there are can't cope with so many thousands. They'd sell out too quick. Anyway, that was our store, and there's me. And every store in those days had a picture behind it of the farmers on their land. They don't do that anymore. And that was the one that we had with our house cow. She was called Rusty. And in those days, Joe and I used to teach a little course down there every Saturday. So we're teaching people how to make compost, how to do worm farming. There wouldn't be room for that now because it's much more. And of course, it had to be zero waste. So we we had these. Now there's plastic bins, but back then we had these beautiful ceramic ones. And after Joe passed away, the market owners, they had a lovely ceremony, and they put this little plaque up there. So I thought that was a lovely acknowledgement. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, after Joe passed away, this was 2008. A friend came to me and said, "We need a green swap." I said, "Yeah, okay, let's do it." So we worked it out. Every Friday morning in summer and every second Friday morning in winter and autumn, we have this green swap, and we meet down at the wharf by the river, and there's this covered thing there, open covered thing, and we all bring the surplus from our gardens and we swap. So we started that 16 years ago, and I thought, oh yeah, it might work for a while, might fizzle out. It hasn't. It is so popular. Sometimes we can have up to 20, 25 people there, and they all bring their surplus, and no money changes hands, we swap. And if we've all got vejo, or if we've all got kale, or if we've all got silver beet, take it home for your chickens. People are enormously generous, giving away what's left over. So it's only half an hour, and we keep it casual. You don't have to become a member. There's no fees. You show up if you've got something, and you don't show up if you haven't got anything. And it's half an hour. So everybody can fit that into their day. And I think that's why it works so well. And you could get all sorts of stuff. Sometimes everyone's got zucchinis, or everyone's got, veggies, but somehow it always finds a home. Someone will say, "Oh yeah, I can take that to my sister," or so. And we have jams, and sometimes people bring bread. So it's really cool. And no money changes hands. And during lockdown, because in Auckland we're part of Auckland, so we had quite a lot of long lockdowns, and we couldn't have this. So we all made up little parcels, and we'd put them out at our gate, and the word would go round. And then, so I had, oh God, it was a bumper year for apples, pears, peaches. So I put my little parcels out, and I'd go out a day or two later, and I might have horse poo or seagrass, or once I got some field mushrooms. That was pretty good. So it was a way of supporting each other, sharing food. It was really awesome. And I still go. I just love it. So the next,
It is.
it is, isn't it? It really is. And so then, after Joe passed away, I carried on the farm for 2 years. I just have to tell a little story here in between. I wasn't going to tell this one, but Kathy reminded me when Joe passed away, before he passed away, he did not want our permaculture course cancelled. And it was meant to happen 2 weeks after he died. He did not want it cancelled. And I was thinking, oh, God, what am I going to do? So I asked the New Zealand teachers and they said, we can't, we're too heartbroken. So Finn came up and I said, Finn, would you call Jeff Lawton in Australia and ask him if he'd teach it? So Finn called Jeff and then Finn came and said, Jeff, he can only come for a week. He's going to come for a week and teach 1 week. And he's spoken to Robin Francis and she'll do the other week. Now, honestly, can you imagine that support from the permaculture community? It was amazing. And Kathy was on that course. And so, and then I wanted to pay them. So, I gave them their money and Jeff, I gave him his money in an envelope. And then I took him to the airport. And when I came home, that envelope was on my table with a little sign, sharing the surplus. He wouldn't take any money. Sharing the surplus. He wouldn't take any money. He left it behind. I mean, the generosity was extraordinary. So anyway, after 2 years, I couldn't cope. But I needed a push. I got the push. Thank you, universe. In the middle of a permaculture course, I tripped over a tree root. I was running around with a tray of cups, tripped over, fractured my ankle and ruptured the tendons. Ended up in a wheelchair for 3 months. I had to have surgery. I thought, thank you, universe. I got the message, right leg, I've got to move on. So I took the hint and I sold the farm and I bought a section in the village where I wanted to recreate Rainbow Valley Farm, didn't I? 1/4 acre. I mean, really, I planted 50 fruit trees. Did I need to do that? Of course I didn't. Anyway, so this was that project. There's no town water there, so first thing was get rainwater tanks. And this time I wanted a house in a hurry. I was living in a camper van. I did not want to wait 6 more years for a house. So I got a wooden house and it went up in about 5 months. So this is my house and I got solar panels, photovoltaics for my electricity and a big solar panel for my hot water. And of course I had to have a wood burner, which when this brick wall was thermal mass for my passive solar house. And I had a wet back. So in winter, if the sun's not shining and heating my hot water, the wet back on the fire is. And it turned out really nice. And this was my soil. Heavy, heavy clay. So I wanted a garden straight away, of course. So I had some little raised beds built along the edge of my deck. And pretty soon I had some veggies. And then, of course, then again, creating fertility, building soil. I got anything I could get hold of. My neighbours down the road used to mow their lawns and put it out in the green waste to be taken away. So I said, I'll have them, save them money. And I got 3 piles of grass clippings, which of course I mixed with those wood chips, which I got in by the truckload full, worms, compost, and this is and then I wanted to plant a feijoa hedge along here. That's what it looked like when the house was finished. Didn't take long. And then I used the magic daikon radish organic crowbars. They go down and you can never eat them all, but they rot down there and the worms eat them and create soil. So, in fact, I had about 2 truckloads of them, not quite. And I took them down to the Australasian Permaculture Convergence down in Turangi, a whole lot of them. So that was what it looked like when the house was finished. And a couple of years later, as I said, nature is remarkably fast. And that's fruit trees growing, veg everywhere. So that was me in 2012 planting my Louisa plum. 3 years later, oh, I love them. They're just the best. And what I did, I had some wood left over from my house build. And because of that soil was a really heavy clay, I thought if I dig a big hole in that clay, it's like a sump. They're not going to like it. So I had these little frames made, and I kind of filled them up with compost and planted the trees there, like in a hump, and they just thrived. And feijoas. I've got 15 feijoas. I mean, really, that's ridiculous. Exactly. Yeah, the green swap. So I've got persimmons. I've got just about everything: bananas, persimmons, grapes, peaches. This was taken a few years ago. I can't grow garlic like that anymore because of the rust. Just wiped out the crop. Mushroom logs. Had to have some of them. Those ones are shiitake. And I think this was my first year harvest. I felt quite pleased with myself. Yeah, it doesn't take long. My next project. A friend came to me and said, I think we need a community garden in Matakana. I said, I don't know. But she was so enthusiastic. I said, okay, then let's have a go. So we asked Auckland Council if we could have this area that was kind of part of a park. They said, no, we want that to stay crisp. So we went to the community hall and said, because that's a community-owned hall, it's not owned by council, can we have an area here for a community garden? And they said, no, we need it for parking when there's a big event. And then we said, well, what about this area? Oh, you can have that. It was a mess. It had terrible weeds. It had rubbish. We found an old pushchair in there. Yeah, it was a mess. But anyway, well, we started small, about 5 meters deep and 14 meters long, and now we've tripled it. So in the beginning, we made it small because Robin and I thought, well, nobody might come. It might just be the two of us. So we better make it small enough that we can handle it ourselves. It's just amazing. This is 12 years later, and we have Monday morning working bees. 12, 15 people show up every week, unless it's raining or it's a public holiday. So anyway, we did a whole lot of, we made a nice vision, and we went and we chewed the ear off every single person that we came across, and we talked to the rural delivery person and said, would you put these notices in the letterboxes? So what we wanted was a place where members of the community can gather to garden, grow veggies, fruit, herbs and flowers, learn, share ideas and relax. Well, this is another one of these things why it's been so successful. You don't have to join. You don't have to become a member. Show up if you feel like it. Don't show up if you don't. So it seems to work. So we called a working bee, and we got a whole lot of people show up. And in one day, we cleared it, sheet mulched it, and created the garden. And there's me and Robin standing there feeling very proud of ourselves. Anyway, now, as I said, then we got into the fruit trees. We planted 50 fruit trees. We've got feijoas, figs, apples, plums, peaches, citrus, and every Monday morning, this was just taken a couple of weeks ago. People show up and we've got a grandmother comes with her grandchildren. This is a young mum. All sorts of people show up. So, yes. Do you know where the community hall is?
I went to high school there many years ago, and West Carter was just farmland.
I know, quiet little rural backwater. Yeah, it's never.
Past that strip of Shopton.
I know.
There's a warehouse out at Dan's
No, there was at Snell's Beach,
Beach.
but the warehouse is gone.
Oh,
That's now a 4-square. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, this is my next project. How much? I've got to hurry up. And this is the one I am most proud of, Mahurangi Waste Busters. So, back in 2017, Auckland Council put out an RFP, request for proposals, to manage 2 transfer stations in the area. So these 2 transfer stations are where people take their rubbish and it gets dumped in a big skip and taken away to a landfill. And so I think, oh yeah, permaculture, produce no waste. This is right up my alley. So I thought, I knew Auckland Council had in its plan, in its waste plan, a vision of zero waste by 2040. And I knew that they wanted some community recycling centres. They wanted communities to take over, to set up community recycling centres. So I thought, I wonder if anyone around here would like a community recycling centre instead of a transfer station. So called a public meeting in the Warkworth Town Hall. And I was blown away. 50 people showed up. Oh my God, that felt like a mandate. So then I had to get busy and I shoulder tapped a few friends and said, oh, will you come? I need to form a trust. Will you be a trustee? Will you be? They all said yes. So with their help, I formed a charitable trust and we called it Mahurangi Waste Busters Trust. And our kaupapa was to reduce waste to landfill. So we put in our RFP. And in 2019, it sort of was a bit stop, start. You have to put in a whole tender and all of that. We got the contract and we converted 2 transfer stations into community recycling centres. And we opened in 2019. Then it was a bit stop, start again because with COVID and the site was an old landfill and there was methane escaping. So they had to do some remedial work and we had to go off the site. And anyway, we reopened this year. And now, and this is our kaupapa, the waste hierarchy. So this is the most preferred. Avoid. If you can't avoid, reduce, reuse, and that's obviously the least preferred at the bottom. So our aim is to turn waste into resources. We promote the reduction, repair, reuse, and recycling of waste. We support community waste minimisation initiative. We do waste education. We want to put resources back into our community for local benefit. We're a social enterprise, so we partnered with Localised, which is owned by the Zero Waste Network, because we had the enthusiasm, we had the ideas, but we didn't have a clue how to run a recycling centre. So luckily, the Zero Waste Network came to we're 50-50 partners in this operation. And they brought all the health and safety, what do they call it? The SAPs, the something, that's it. And so we also, as well as running the sites, we support community events. We do beach and town cleanups. We run movie screenings about plastic in the oceans in the Matakana cinemas. And over on our recycling centres, we just rebranded them Less Waste. And we take all of this stuff. We take anything that we can send somewhere to be reprocessed, recycled, reused, and we're aiming for 80% diversion from landfill. Sometimes we can't do anything with it. It has to go in a skip and go to a landfill, but we're aiming for 85%, 80%. We've got to about 65, so we've got a little way to go. We host school groups, we go and we make compost. So we collect stuff from local businesses. We collect hops from the Sawmill Brewery, coffee from the Matakana Roastery. We get fish from a local fish smokehouse, and what else? All of these places. So, and we make compost in these boxes.
Was it down or
We put it in whole, but we use EM and biochar, which takes away any smell and helps eat the effective microorganisms sort of ferment it. We end up with a few bones, but it's not too bad.
where do you help?
At our shop. Let me tell you about the shop. So what else we do? We're currently working in 8 early childhood centres, teaching the kids about waste. The kids get it. We do waste audits, so we save up all their waste from all their classrooms, we spread it all out, and then the kids have to decide where it goes. We do repair cafes with fabric rescues, and our new shop opened in April, and this is on the picture on the front of our local newspaper. I had to wait till I was in my 70s to become a cover girl, but I've made it. I've made it. I'm cutting the ribbon with the head of Waste Solutions at Auckland Council.